Questions so far before I move on?
I don't know if I can frame it right. I know where you're going, and I appreciate it. But let me work through with origin just a bit. There are certainly with the historical grammatical hermeneutic, there are very firm, seemingly pretty firm boundaries for interpretation within the hermeneutics. But when it comes to the sacramental, this approach that Origen uses, especially using the song as a test case, where are the boundaries for interpretation? Certainly, I heard you say, certainly the Holy Spirit, and I can appreciate that. We should all appreciate that. But it seems like there's a lot of human imagination, and then carry that further in St. Bernard, Clairvaux, and on and on and on. Especially with that, maybe if you would speak a little bit about that particular test case.
In terms of the question of boundaries, as you very kindly put it, or really the question is more often is put arbitrariness with regard to the Church Fathers, right? What sort of boundaries are there around this? How does this lead to arbitrary exegesis? There's numerous things I think that should and could be said. One is the Holy Spirit thing that you mentioned. Another is the question of whether a contemporary historical biblical scholarship escapes arbitrariness itself. Now, remember what I said earlier, that on a nominalist understanding of reality, we have to construct our own meaning, always. So I actually think that contemporary, strictly historical scholarship, when it's strictly historical, it ends up arbitrarily assigning meaning. So I turn the accusation against the historical critics and say, actually, the ones who are arbitrary, it's not the ancients, but it's you. And it shows in your scholarship, because while there are lots of similarities among patristic and medieval authors on any given text, and usually, there's also dissimilarity, to be sure, but they're broadly similar because they're usually driven by Christology and by ecclesiology. The historical critics differ far more among themselves in their exegesis of particular texts. So the actual outcome of exegesis isn't one where you have arbitrariness among fathers and medieval authors, and not with modern critics. It's also not quite the other way around, but it is true, I think, that historical critics are more divergent. Their methods diverge from each other, their results diverge from each other. They do not arrive at a common meaning. In fact, we saw Andrew Louth, Discerning the Mystery, great book, you should read on this, Discerning the Mystery. Andrew Louth makes the point that when we treat previous exegetes simply as stepping stones to where we are today, rather than read them for their own theological insight in terms of how they treat the scriptures, we actually condemn ourselves as exegetes today to the dustbin of history. I think that's true, and invariably true. So I'm not going to say what biblical author John, Paul, whoever really said, but of course in doing so I'm going to correct those who came before me, and I already, if I'm honest to myself, know that my student who's going to do his PhD on topic whatever is going to correct me, right? So historical critical scholarship never arrives at assured results. In terms of the tradition, this was a bounded exercise. A bounded exercise, not an arbitrary one. It was a bounded exercise inasmuch as it took place within the church, physical church. It took place within the confines of the confession of the church, creeds, especially the rule of faith. And it took place with always an aim, a teleological aim of sharing in the beatific vision. So one of the questions that many of these exegetes will ask is not how is this true historically, but how does this build up? How is this useful? So from a modern perspective, a particular reading, say of Origen or Gregory may look very arbitrary. And it's because we're expecting them to unearth what it meant historically, or what the author meant of authorial intent, or something along those lines. They're not doing that. They're not interested in that, right? They're doing, I think, what St. Paul did. And they pattern their own exegesis on that of St. Paul. What they're doing is they're saying, how can we use the Old Testament? If we were to read St. Paul's use of the Old Testament, and we asked ourselves, does he interpret the Bible properly, the Old Testament properly? Well, I think we would all scratch our heads. Because it clearly is not interested, even, perhaps, at least not uniformly interested, in uncovering the historical meaning of the text. He just doesn't do that. That's why many New Testament scholars talk instead about Paul's use of the Old Testament, right? Very nice term. And the reason they talk about Paul's use of the Old Testament is because they know they're not interpreting, Paul's not interpreting the Old Testament the way they themselves are interpreting the Old Testament. What do you do with that? One way is say, well, Paul's not doing exegesis. Right? That's fine. That's fine. But I would rather take the approach of saying, Paul is doing exegesis, and we should do it the same way, or at least in a similar manner. And if, I mean, you don't want to fight it, whereas maybe you don't want to call it exegesis, that's fine. But I think that's what we should do with the Old Testament. We should use the Old Testament to not to determine the original meaning primarily, although that has a role, but primarily with a view to telos, of seeing God face to face, building up the congregation. Now, historical investigation has a role in that. It's a role in that. But what the devil does, I think, is that we're treating the text to figure out what place it has here. And then we're struggling with the question, now what am I going to do in my preaching? How am I going to apply this? And that's why I think that question never came up. The question of application never comes up for Origen or Augustine or Gregory. If you're asking the question, how do we do this, like a very practical question, if you're asking that, I can't at the time that we have do that. It requires a couple of days. But what I can do is ask you to have a look at a book of sermons I've done, Sacramental preaching it's called. And I've purposely published that to show that, yeah, we can actually do this today, Sacramental preaching. And I have there also, after each sermon, a section of preacher's notes that are meant to show why I arrived at a sermon the way that I did. So that may be helpful, and I think what also may be helpful, although perhaps in your question somewhat less so, is my scriptures with presence. But I think the sermons, especially for a sort of practical question, if you have that, may be most helpful.